But I mean, the philosophical issue behind this really has to do with values. It has to do with dimensions of appetites and delusions in us that we no longer know how to recognize and call by their proper names. Our economy has created a kind of envelope of cosmetic terminology, the rhetoric of advertising. We're used to living in what I call a mendacious culture. I mean, there's just lying everywhere you turn around. You expect to be lied to by commercials. You expect to be lied to by college presidents who say, well, we have the best school in the land. You expect to be lied to by candidates who tell the public what they want to hear. Truth is something that hurts so bad, it's practically become renegade. When you deal with a population that has far more self-deception motivating it than self-discipline, that is the effect. Mendacity becomes so normalized that people no longer know where the ground is under their feet. I mean, Marx used the term false consciousness to talk about this kind of circumstance when people think they know what's what. They think they know, how to live, what they need to do, etc. But all of their calculations concerning the real world are really corrupted by an inner falsehood. The inability to grasp truth in its actual existential form, that inability has become epidemic, become structural for the society. I see, when I teach the 19th century philosophers, students are astonished how much of what is going on in our contemporary society falls perfectly into their categories. I mean, it's not a matter of, antiquarian issues and questions of whether Marxism is dead or whether Nietzsche really has a positive alternative to Christianity. The fallacies and delusions that they saw our society as tending toward, we've gone down that road without any sense of hesitation. We should be far more suspicious of our own gullibility, our ability to be led. If we developed the kind of culture that would make us resistant and critical, the task of the educational system would be completely different. I mean, students sit there passive as clams in most circumstances. They're very disoriented for a couple of weeks in my classes, until they figure out that if they don't produce some active thinking, they're going to get lost. They just, you can't take down finite quotable facts like sound bites from a philosophy discussion. Philosophy tries to activate principles of understanding in students when it's done right. Most students find this, I warn them, when it's done right, it's like a case of culture shock. They thought they knew what an education was all about. They get into a philosophy class and find out they have never yet been challenged. In most cases, it's a rare instance where they have, they've read on their own, they've thought about the issues on their own, they've had some teacher that wanted to encourage independent thinking. And it's just distressing how much college has come to look like what high school used to be. That the training of students as if they were in the military, where they're really trying to get in line with something that's expected of them, instead of being opened up, being, challenged and stimulated to do original work of their own. So.
What do you think we should do as individuals if we wanted to?
I believe, well, for one thing, individuals certainly need to create a different kind of networking with one another. When you find writing, articles, novels, whatever, that conveys substantial and significant understanding. Spread this. Share the good and important things that you find with one another. If you just go searching for these things on your own, it is so difficult to experience more than just a fraction, because we overproduce. We just bombard people with so much trash. There's just I'm mortally indebted to every good friend that I've ever had who has recommended, there's some author I need to check into. Students get back in touch with me years after taking my classes. Here is someone that, would really resonate with the kinds of issues you're trying to present. If we just do this kind of thing as individuals, it has no effect, and our sampling of the culture is just so feeble that way. So, make contacts, share. I circulate photocopies of important articles I find, among a considerable number of people. The other consideration, I think, is be constantly evaluating everything you read and hear and discuss with people. What I want to suggest is start collecting what you think are the most important and insightful passages from all the things you run across, as if you had to collect a treasury of some kind. This is a way of conveying in an essential form the most substantial things that you've run across. On the one hand, it trains you to learn how to evaluate, look for what's essential. For another thing, you don't know, but that hundreds or thousands of other people might very well be strengthened or encouraged if they could get access to the best quality of these kinds of selections. I mean, the books of quotations that you see so commonly, the 637 best things anybody ever said, etc. These are often as provocative as they are witty. There's a lot of wisdom in those things also. I look to see those kinds of things turn more philosophical, I think, as the next decades come on. I think precisely because there is so much that has to be passed through, just as if you were a mining prospector and you're panning for gold. I mean, you have to go through volumes and volumes and magazines for years and years in order to come up with just a handful of really choice insights. These things, by helping you shape your standards of what is valuable and significant, they help shape your intelligence. Just the practice of doing this makes you a sharper, more incisive person, and it also takes what it does is counteract something that I think is very pernicious in our culture. When we read for entertainment, we read for the sake of our isolated personal satisfaction. Imagine you had to read with other people sitting on your shoulder. Okay, is this so important that I think other people ought to know about it, and so on and so on. So if you think of it in terms of using your eyes and your mind for the benefit of other people, it puts an entirely different quality of decisiveness and a different scheme of standards that you start evaluating those things in terms of. So, I mean, in an ideal situation, what I'm guessing perhaps is, like fish in the ocean, we're filtering all the stuff that's in the culture. And the difference is fish, of course, consume and destroy what they process. But our minds work in a peculiarly human or rational way. We ought to be able to preserve what's most significant out of that culture. And this is a difficult task because the culture itself doesn't seem to care. What's significant, what's trash. It's it's like a monstrous. Kierkegaard and Nietzsche compared it to a flea market of values, and it's just trash and treasure sitting in a jumble. If we had a developed sense of philosophical intelligence, cultural insight, I think we would we would be doing those kinds of things normally. I mean, they're individuals who keep journals, which I consider to be just indispensable to sharpening anyone's culture and intelligence. There are individuals who do try to collect these things. You know, they do it for their own benefit. Ideally, I think it should be shared. It should be, you know, it occurred to me at some point, I have an entire study where I do most of my philosophical writing, and the walls are lined with, you know, all the substantial books I've spent time working on over the years. I started stacking books on top of one another and realized how much some of these authors had in common with one another. I hadn't thought about, you know, what Blake had in common with Italo Calvino or Borges or whatever. And I realized there was a certain worldview that some of these people had in common. I started going through and selecting passages, doing the very kind of thing I'm recommending that I think is healthy for anyone to do. You know, don't just read, don't just be, you know, a sponge that is consuming the culture. Evaluate it, look for substance. If something is pleasant or entertaining to read, but you're not really getting any substance out of it, you should feel cheated. You should feel that, you know, well, there's thousands of books like that out there. Why, you know, do you really want to waste your life, you know, on that kind of self-distraction? Better by far to hold a kind of standard over yourself where you expect substance. You know, if you're not getting it from one novelist, find another. If you're not getting it from one columnist, you know, search out another. Our habits, our reading habits are so passive, so habituated. People tend to stay in the same rut, read the same kind of thing. You know, they have their favorites. I believe in exploring. I think the more exotic the source, the better. You know, to me, a new writer is like a fresh breath of air. I want to find, you know, someone else who has anomalous, extraordinary things to say. Reading, if it is properly carried out, reading has all the virtues of cannibalism. You have the ability to eat somebody else's intelligence, you know, and digest them, make them part of your intelligence. You know, to me, an effective education does that to people. It turns them into omnivorous, you know, curious, searching creatures. So, well, you know, when I did my magazines, my books, the various stories I've done from time to time, and the columns and the comics journal, you know, I guess if I had some kind of image of what an ideal reader ought to be, it would be that. You know, somebody who was, you know, like beachcombers in the culture. They're searching for what's interesting, what's remarkable, what deserves to be recognized as precious and, you know, worth keeping. Because the sad fact is we are conditioning people to a throwaway culture.
But wait a minute, a lot of this is a lot relativistic, though.
Yes.
I mean, what one person finds beneficial about
That's
something
right.
is, you know, not substantial for another.
Of course. Ideally, if those two individuals sat together and argued it out, it would be enlightening. Okay, ideally it's the purpose of politics. You know, we have a public medium where differences of perspective are supposed to be hashed out that way. Controversy is part of the healthy lifeblood of a culture that has a culture of sufficient vitality. We tend to sit back like consumers and let the issues of the times get handed to us on a platter. This is not democracy as the Greeks designed it. Democracy is for direct participation, and there should be enough active minds in a society willing to get involved in the conflict, to argue for, to make themselves into champions of what they think is best.